This is my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, July 17th, 2023.
Case file number 1198, written by Taylor Flaw. The Uninvited Observers. I was watching Lost on my computer one night in college. It was the episode where Juliet is down at the bottom of a hole. Won't say more for spoilers, but watch it. I had paused the episode at some point after she fell down the hole, because I had to go to bed. I turned off my computer monitor and went to sleep. 3 in the morning, I'm woken up by the sounds of coughing and wheezing. I start freaking out because it's so loud and directly inside of my room. I turn on the lights and realize it's just one episode of Lost unpausing itself, and Juliet is down in that hole making dying noises. I turn off my computer, reassured that technology is just a jerk. I go back to sleep. Then the weird moment happens. I get back into bed. Not a minute goes by before I hear 2 voices. The first says, "Do you like the room?" The second voice only says, "Yes." My eyes pop open and I feel like they're going to escape my head. The sound I have no explanation for. I jump out of bed and go to my computer to make sure it's turned off. It is. I had roommates at the time, so I think maybe it's a prank, and I search my entire room for one of them. Nothing. I give up and go back to bed, but basically keep my eyes open for the rest of the night, waiting for another voice. I still have no idea what happened that night. Any theories would be fantastic. Case file number 1199, written by USSC, the Logic-Defying car. I feel like I'm a little late to the game, but I'll share my experience anyways. Last summer, a friend and I were coming back from a weekend trip and were traveling along a country highway. This was around 1 or 2 in the morning, and you almost never see a car, but we were slowly catching up to a black car. Now this guy was going at a good clip, so we were ecstatic to follow him. 20 minutes later, we were still behind him and just passing through a small town. We get to the other side of town and get held up at a red light. Light turns green and the guy gets up to speed. Fast. My buddy isn't willing to go as fast as this guy is going. He was going maybe 130 kilometers in a 90. Anyways, the guy is maybe 200 feet ahead of us and his taillights just vanish as if he's gone over a hill or off the road. We knew this stretch of the highway where there were no turns, no hills, and no side roads. My friend and I were curious, so we tried to catch up. He maxed his car out and we were going 170 for a good few minutes. We never caught him and could see for a long distance there were no lights. Freaked us both out, and we concluded that the car had vanished. Case file number 1200, written by Anonymous, Unraveling the Premonition Puzzle. When I was about 14, I was driving back home from a show with some friends. It was pretty late at night, and not only do I live pretty far in the middle of nowhere, but I had the house to myself that night. My mom was with her boyfriend. Naturally, the smartest thing to do is to get on the subject of ghost stories. We go back and forth a bit, swapping stories, when all of a sudden, a really strange feeling washes over me, and I have a premonition of finding this old picture of me and my recently deceased grandmother. I had been feeling very guilty at that time for not spending enough time with my grandparents. It was an old photo of me and her when I was probably about 9, with bleached blonde hair at one of my soccer games. I hadn't seen it in years and years, but somehow I just had a feeling that I was going to find it. It was a very strange feeling that I couldn't shake for the rest of the night. The next morning I wake up and my mom tells me that before I go out and do anything for the day, I'll have to tidy up my messy room. I'm shoving miscellaneous items in this compartment I have in my dresser in my room. It's an open compartment with a horizontal divider that slips in, dividing the space in half. I'm digging around in the compartment, which I hardly use in the first place, when I see a red paper folder pressed up against the back of the compartment, lodged in there by the divider. I see it and somehow I already knew immediately what I'm going to find inside. I open it up and sure enough, the only thing in that folder was the exact picture I had the premonition about the night before. Not exactly creepy, but to me it was proof that there are forces at play in the universe that we just don't yet understand. Case file number 1201, written by Aristotle's Ball Collection, the Darkened Deck Anomaly. So this just happened to me and my 2 friends earlier tonight. Basically, I have a back deck with French doors that open up directly into my lounge room. and when you sit outside on the deck, the light from the lamp in the lounge room shines out into the deck, partially illuminating it. When it's turned on, of course. When we go out onto the deck to smoke, just before doing so, make it a point to turn off the lamp so we can enjoy the atmosphere of smoking in the dark. Once outside, one of my mates turns on the flashlight on his phone. This is important later, so we can get settled, sort out seats, etc. So we spark it up, engage in conversation, and a considerable amount of time passes until I notice the lamp from inside shining on my friend's face, but not in a way that it suddenly turned on and I noticed, more that it had been on the entire time and I only noticed afterwards. I pause mid-conversation and ask the other two if that light had been on the whole time. They stop and look at me before one of them says that it has, and we didn't turn it off when we came outside, which seems fine, till I remember the flashlight we turned on in order to see because it was pitch freaking black. We begin to analyze the situation, and all recall vivid memories of only seeing the amber of the substance we were smoking and never being able to make out each other's faces in the darkness. We also can't recall which of us turned off the lamp when we made a point of doing so earlier, but none of us actually noticed it turning on the whole time. It was only until I pointed it out that we realized none of it adds up. What the hell happened? Also, none of my family were at home at the time. It was just us. Case file number 1202, written by Tortoise Defect. An entire train platform vanished. Happened to me last month. It was around 2 p.m. as I got off the train on a busy stop as per my usual daily routine. Now, during the afternoon hours, there are usually quite a few people patiently waiting by the train platform, normally between 10 to 20 soon-to-be passengers in line. There were also plenty of folks on the train that was on, so walking out from the front end of the train, I look down the long stretch of the train platform before heading out of the station, and I see it's completely empty. Not a single person in sight getting on or off. I hear no audible conversations. The train itself is pretty much dead silent. My footsteps are the only sound echoing across a long, underground platform, and against the prevalent silence, my wooden soles are loud, click-clacking as I'm walking towards the station exit. Glancing back into the train I had just exited, all I see are eyes meeting back at mine, all staring at the lone person leaving the station platform. Just spooky. Bonus file written by Siphon the Enigma. Haunting tales from the Frontier Living program. During the summers of high school and college, I worked at a large Boy Scout camp in Southwest Virginia. The property is 17,000 acres of dense wilderness with 2 base camps and several backcountry outposts. Over the years, there have been plenty of strange occurrences. I'll do my best to recount a few of them. One year after the summer session had ended, a few of us stayed in camp to hang out and help with some final winterizing before heading back to school. One of our tasks was to clean up the empty staff cabins and shower house. To give you an idea of the layout of the staff camp, it was basically a parking lot with 2 large cabins for the senior staff on the west side, a shower house with pseudo-outdoor stalls like you'd find at a state park on the south side, and several smaller cabins for the junior staff on the east side. Since all of us remaining were in the senior cabin, we went through and swept out all the junior cabins and made sure the porch lights were off and did the same with the shower stalls. That night, while chilling on our porch, we looked across the parking lot and 3 porch lights were on in the junior staff cabins. No one else had been in camp but the 4 of us, and none of us had any reason to go back and turn on the lights. The next night, we noticed a light on in the shower house, which had been fully cleaned and each stall padlocked. We were using the nice bathrooms and showers in the admin building at this point. Upon investigation, we discovered that the stall with the light on was still locked from the outside. When we unlocked it to turn off the light, there was evidence the bathroom had been used. Another summer again, after all the campers were gone, a similar small group of us were down by the lake in canoes, fishing and screwing around. It was about dusk, and I noticed a light on the side of the hill behind the lake. It was like a normal incandescent bulb, but it was shining through the trees in an area far from any camp buildings. I pointed it out to the others, and we kind of stared at it for a few minutes until another one appeared. It didn't appear abruptly, but seemed to slowly brighten out of nothing like a dimmer switch. After a few more minutes, another one appeared in the same way. At this point, 2 of the guys paddled to shore and jumped in the truck to go check it out, though where the lights were coming from was pretty dense woods on a steep hill with no access by road or trail. As soon as we heard the truck get up to the top of the hill, the lights faded out. They walked down through where we had seen them, but didn't find anything that could have been a light source. One of the wilderness camps about a 2-mile hike from base camp is used once a week for the first-year campers for their overnighters. This camp is at the edge of the property, with a road running by it and a creek on the opposite side. One of my friends who was director of the first-year program for several years has on multiple occasions heard the sounds of scouts playing in the creeks across the road, only to find no one when he goes to yell at them to go back to campsite. Another of our outposts is a frontier living program where the campers live like 1840s era pioneers. The staff even wear period attire. On occasion, they have seen a man walking through the camp early in the morning dressed like a Union soldier from the Civil War. Even some adult leaders have reported seeing him, with no prior knowledge of his sightings. At the same frontier living outpost, the camp director's cabin is about 40 yards from one of the campsites. Teenage boys tend to be loud and keep late hours, so the camp director is sometimes kept awake by their rowdiness. Once they were getting pretty out of hand, and it was almost 1 in the morning. Out of exasperation, the camp director just yelled, "Shut up!" into the darkness without even getting out of bed. The noise died away instantly. Puzzled, he wondered how they had heard him over their own noise when he was that far away inside the cabin with all the doors and windows closed. Then he realized that it was Saturday night between sessions and that there was no one in that campsite. Case file number 1203, written by Plotted Unit 1, Twisted Blood. When I was 6 years old, my sister was in the living room and I was playing in the upstairs hallway. I was getting really loud, so my sister yelled that I needed to shut up. I started walking down the stairs and called her fat face and leave me alone. My sister then grabbed the remote and threw it at me. Usually that would not be a big deal to me. We housed around roughly all the time, but the remote hit me in the face. My nose started gushing blood and the remote was broken where you could see the circuit board and the body of the remote. I hunched over crying, holding my nose. As I stood up to go downstairs to tell my mom, something strange happened. I was at the top of the stairs. I didn't walk up the stairs after my sister hit me. I looked at my hands. There was no blood. I went into the bathroom in the hall, and I looked fine. No swelling, no blood stains, nothing. When I looked down the stairs, my sister was still sitting on the couch with the remote in her hand. When I told my sister this, she thought I was crazy. I told her about it again now that we are older, and she thinks it might have been a false memory. But I remember what I was wearing, the toys, how the hit in the nose felt, in perfect detail. I think it was some weird déjà vu thing. Bonus file written by Anonymous, The Ghostly Breath. I've told this story before, some months ago, but it's pretty creepy. My parents live in a nice centered chimney cape just outside of Kennebunkport, Maine. The house was built around 1760 and moved to its current location in the 80s. It has sporadic paranormal activity, most of which I never experienced as they purchased the house after I moved to another state for college. One bitterly cold January, I was staying with my parents on my winter break from school. I think it was my sophomore year. An 18th century house is always a drafty mess, and with the wind whipping over the field and slamming onto the side of the house, it was damn near frigid inside. We were earning our stripes that year. My little sister, who is 7 years my junior, and I were sharing a big bed in one of the downstairs front rooms. Sharing beds makes a big difference when it's wicked cold outside. I woke up at about 8 a.m. to an almost empty house. My parents were away, and my younger brother was asleep in another room far across the house, so it was just my sister and I in the main house. As I'm lying there trying to build up the will to leave the warm bed, I start hearing a strange noise. It sounds distinctly like someone having a great deal of difficulty breathing. Long, raky, phlegmy breaths. I think to myself, crap, my little sister must have one hell of a cold. After about 20 seconds of this, I roll over to check on her as she really sounds like she's going to die. except she's silent as a church mouse, wide awake, facing me. As soon as I see her face, I realize she's not making the sound, and she can hear it too. She whispers, "That's not you?" The sound is continuing even as we have a panicked whispered exchange. It's clearly coming from the bed, and it's not quiet or subtle at all. In utter disbelief, we jumped out of the bed, the struggling breathing still carrying on. We checked under the bed, all over the room, nothing. Finally it stops. We never heard it again, nor has anyone else in the family. An interesting aside, we researched the history of the house a little later, and it turns out the owners in the first quarter of the 19th century, Charles and Sally Eaton, had a bit of a rough time in the house. Between 1820 and 1830, Sally and 6 of the 9 children died of consumption, tuberculosis, in the house. I believe we may have been hearing one of those unfortunate souls' death rattle. Bonus file written by Sparkle Biscuit, The Enigma of Paradise Road. Back in high school, my boyfriend, his friends, and I decided to explore some well-known haunted places in our area. We'd never done it before, but it was midnight on a Tuesday and we were bored. We looked up places online to find the places with the most interesting backstories and lore, and stumbled across stories about this one road called Paradise Road. There was an extensive message board explaining how people had seen dark figures or headless raccoons, cars would randomly stop working while driving through the road, and so on. We ventured onto this road, which took us a total of about 3 hours due to it being in the middle of nowhere and during a time where smartphones didn't exist. But once we turned on the road, we were all pretty excited. We decided to drive through the road once, just to get a feel of it. It was a pretty short road, and driving as slow as 5 miles an hour took us about 2 to 3 minutes to drive through. It was surrounded by these really tall woods, so when looking out the window, all you could see was trees. When we turned around to drive back the other direction, that's when all of a sudden dozens of little gold lights appeared in between the trees. They looked like they were floating Christmas lights, and they would hover slightly. Keep in mind it was 3:30 a.m. on a cold November rainy day, and we were all sober. I freaked out when I saw the lights and looked away, and when I looked back, they were all gone. I asked my friends, "Did you guys see that?" And they responded with yes. I'm not sure what it was, but it was pretty surreal and dreamlike. The weirdest thing was we weren't even expecting that. There was no description of lights or orbs appearing on the road, from what we read. I personally did not leave the car to explore because I was too scared, but my friends did, and they said they could hear faint screaming and whispering to get out of the woods. Case file number 1204, written by EXP 10510N. World War II, supernatural style. When I was about 11, we lived in Germany. My dad was in the army, so we lived in old houses that probably date back to World War II. Anyways, this place we stayed at in Wiesbaden gave my family no small amount of tales. The most repeated tale is a night my little brother woke up screaming. He had to have been 7 or 8 at the time. He wakes the whole house, screaming bloody murder. This is not normal behavior for him, and I honestly can't recall him ever doing it before or since, but that night he was screaming. He claims to have seen a black figure at the foot of his bed, just solid black. He says the thing just stood there, but the vibe he got wasn't "let's be friends." He said he could feel the hatred. Dad was the first to burst in, and I only found out maybe about 2 years ago that he saw the same thing just before turning the light on. Same house. My mom was home alone during the day with my other little brother, who was a baby at this time. She hears sounds in the kitchen, like a spoon scraping against a bowl, and starts going to it thinking it's my dad, who did sometimes come home for lunch. Goes into the kitchen, nothing there. And finally, the baby brother had a teddy bear that sang the Lord's Prayer when you pressed the button on his hand. My younger siblings and I were in the living room watching TV, and heard a little demon bear start its prayer from down the hallway, nowhere near us. Combined with the general sense of uneasiness that house caused, I really want to go back there someday, if only to see if what I remember is tinged by the fact that I was young, and wonder how much is just family lore that gets grandiose with time. Case file number 1205, written by Anonymous. An impossible message on a dead phone. When I was around 9 to 10 years old, I had an old singular wireless cell phone my grandma let me play with. I liked playing Snake. It hadn't been in service for years. Eventually, the battery was so shot it wouldn't hold enough of a charge to stay powered on. One night in the summer, we had a line of pretty nasty storms roll in. I love thunderstorms during the day, but after the storms that rolled through the southeast in '02 killed 11 people in my town, any sign of thunder after dark spooked me. I was just laying down for bed as they started. I was saying my evening prayers as I always did. Of course, I was asking for protection from the storms. 5 minutes later, the cell phone came on. Then it made a ding. I looked at it, and it had a text message. It read, "I love you, and I will." I took it to my mom quickly, and had her look up the area code. Somewhere in Illinois. So I went to sleep. I didn't connect the dots in my head for a few days. My jaw dropped when I realized what happened. When digging for the phone in my mess of a room, nothing on it. My younger brother had done a factory reset on it, playing with it. Case file number 1206, written by KRock7, The Hidden Threads of Premonition. One morning I was in my kitchen making breakfast. I had been up for about 30 minutes and didn't remember any of my dreams from the night. My mom had just left to run some errands and she phoned me, asking if I could manually close the garage door because the sensors were messed up. As soon as she started saying this, I instantly remembered that I dreamed of it happening the night before. Later that day, my buddy picked me up. We were just going to chill. He said he wanted to buy a guitar and learn how to play. He had never mentioned this before, so we went to a music store. We walked in, and there was a guy at the counter holding a ukulele, and I had an instant memory of dreaming that I was in the store and pissing around with a ukulele. There was one more event that day, that upon occurring, I immediately remembered dreaming it the night before. I still don't know how to explain it, although someone said that sometimes when a person's anxious, their soul leaves the body and travels through time throughout the night, if you believe that sort of thing. Creepy file number 101, written by Strange, the Sinister Russian Councelor. I live near a camp that I used to attend as a child. When I was 7, there was a counselor at the camp who was Russian. The camp has a very large staff exchange program with many different countries, and very weird at that. Counselor said he was incredibly fast, and during staff-only campfires, he would catch, skin, and eat live rabbits. He could do this crazy sleeper hold move. It essentially was a strangling move that knocked you out for a few seconds. You came to and were fine a minute later. I saw him do it on a counselor once. The guy was out for about 10 seconds. He was forbidden to do it after that. However, the kids got curious and started asking him to do the move. He would do it in secret, but he would increase the severity of his holds, which in turn would keep the kid knocked out for a longer period of time. One day, a camper went missing. He wasn't in his bunk, despite going to bed with his cabin that night. They did a camp-wide search, keeping us all on the soccer field for about 2 hours. The counselors even had to start searching the water. They found his body under the sailing dock, completely out cold. He was alive, but very unconscious. He had strangle marks around his neck. Everyone knew who it was. They arrested the Russian guy and deported him back to Russia. Turns out they never even sent an exchange counselor. Nobody knew who the hell he was. Case file number 1207, written by Zushiba, The Time Portal Within Portland State University. Absolute oddest thing that has ever happened to me that I think I would have believed it was a delusion if I hadn't been with someone else at the time. It was around 1998 and 1999. I was with a high school group and we were attending a conference of some sort at Portland State University. Our teacher had split us up into groups of 2 and we were assigned different presentations we were supposed to go see. We got our list of presentations and the time they were being held at and sent on our way. Me and my classmate, Jacob, were to go to the 2nd or 3rd floor to see a talk on invasive species in Oregon, so we looked at the map and found the room we were supposed to go to. We decided to take the elevator since we were both lazy and wanted to avoid the crowd on the stairs. So we get in the elevator and go up to, I forget if it was a second or third floor. I believe it was a third, as I think we started out on the second floor. Once we got off, we were definitely in the same building, but everything seemed duller and there was no one anywhere. The entire place looked like it was from the 60s or something. Nothing had been updated, and the entire area blocked off and taped up and dusty. All the doors leading out of the small area we were at when we got off the elevator were locked, and the windows were black. We couldn't tell if it was black paper taped over the windows or not, but we couldn't see anything through the windows on the doors. Looking out the windows onto the street, we saw cars, but no people anywhere. Keep in mind, this is in the middle of Portland, Oregon, so there should be hippies all over the place, but not a soul was seen. I finally found a door that was open and went through it, but the whole building seemed to be abandoned. So I went back to the elevator and met Jacob, who hadn't seen anything more than I did. At the time, there were several hundred people at Portland State University for this conference, so the third floor should be buzzing with activity, but we neither saw nor heard a soul. You couldn't even hear the activity downstairs. Jacob had a very uneasy feeling, and I agreed we should probably go back downstairs. So we got back on the elevator and got off on the second floor where we came from, if I recall correctly. And we were back. Bright lights and a bunch of people all over the place. We looked at the map again and found the location of our assigned presentation, and it said it was up one floor from where we were, so this time we took the stairs. We found ourselves right where we had been, but everything was shiny and new, updated, and looked like new paint. None of the doors were locked, and there were people everywhere. Looking outside onto the street, the hippies were in full frolic. I have no idea where Jacob and I went that day on the elevator, but it was probably a good thing we came back. Bonus file written by Kiran G. Horror at the Red-Eyed Mountain. I used to live in Arizona, right between a couple of mountains. One was called Superstition, with the associated rumors you'd expect. The other was Red Mountain, which was a Yavapai Indian holy site, and off-limits unless you have a permit. There are a decent amount of stories about skinwalkers and other nasty Native American beasties like the Hoofy to come out of the area. I've always had a fascination with those stories, but was never scared of them. I spent a lot of time wandering around the desert and was used to seeing all manner of wildlife, including coyotes, mountain lions, javelinas, and various deer. As we frequently did, a couple of friends and I went camping one weekend. We picked a new spot along the Gila River, within close but legal distance of the Red Mountain. We scouted it a couple weeks before, and as far as anyone could tell, it was public land and perfectly legal for us to be on. Near the river in a nice clearing free of the ever-present jumping cola. It was a beautiful night, a clear, warm, wonderful view of the Milky Way. We could hear frogs down at the river and the occasional yipping of the local coyote pack. Then, around 3 a.m., everything went quiet. You could almost feel the silence pressing down around you. We throw a couple extra logs on the fire and instinctively huddle around it. Couple minutes go by, then, from across the river, we hear the sounds of drums. No one has ever really been able to decide if they were one or two, but it sounded like a low, steady heartbeat. The sound abruptly cut off after about 10 minutes or so, and we were pretty damn relieved. Then we noticed the silence was the same, only this time, it felt like we were being watched. From the other side of the fire, one sound kicks in. It's a snuffling, shuffling sound, exactly like a javelina rooting around for a snack. Now, javelinas are cute little pigs, ranging from 50 to 90 pounds or so. This one was not cute in any sense of the word. He was grizzled, ragged, and huge, at least 4 feet at the shoulder, at least 120 pounds, and his eyes glowed red. I've never seen eyes like that. He seemed to inspect our campsite and looked at each and every one of us from across the fire. We were being assessed. I don't know for what. Suddenly, a mass of sap lit off in the fire. When the sparks died down, he was gone. Slowly, the normal nighttime sound started up again, and we passed the rest of the night in relative peace, and booked it out of there the first thing in the morning. We never went back to that particular campsite again. It took a couple months before I felt comfortable outside at night. I eventually was able to go hiking on the Red Mountain with a Yavapai guide, and we resumed our weekend camping trips. I never saw anything like that javelina again though.
Case notes for file 1198, The Uninvited Observers. I've had that happen a few times where my computer has a YouTube or Netflix video paused while I sat down for a 30-minute nap that somehow morphed into a 5-hour nap. Does it even qualify as a nap at that point? I don't know. Woken up to the video somehow playing. Probably a computer glitch, nothing to do with a supernatural anomaly, but still odd, right? As for the voices heard though, perhaps people in a parallel world, in the exact same physical location, looking to rent a room in that house. Or hell, maybe spirits trying to find a new place to call home too. Casper the real estate agent? Probably the former though, I'd guess. Just a parallel world crossover, but not fully crossover, just a sound. Because you didn't even see anyone. Although maybe you would have seen them if you weren't sleeping, so maybe it was more of a full crossover, but still, it's like seeing through glass. The barrier is still there, but you can just see across it. I don't know why it's thin in some places, and only at some times, because it doesn't happen again, usually in the same place. Unlike lightning, which really does strike in the same place multiple times, it's more likely to strike in the same place, so I don't know where that folk legend came from. Case notes are file 1199, The Logic-Defying car. Can't be too late to share your experiences, honestly. I doubt we'll get a conclusive answer to all of them even after centuries of reading about them. Some will be solved, new ones will pop up. It seems to be the standard ebb and flow of the universe, keeps us on our toes. We can't fully solve it. And what you witnessed was likely a space-time rip. So the car crosses it, the portal collapses, so you travel through to the same space it occupied, but the portal isn't there anymore. The first one, took it, and then it just closes itself. Then the car vanished from your perspective, but was teleported far away. I'm surprised there aren't more accounts of drivers seeing other cars vanish from thin air, though. Because there's so many accounts from the first-person perspective of it happening to a driver or the passenger, but rarely seen from outside. Does that mean that these are tailor-made and placed in specific locations as tests? Maybe it doesn't really strike me as happenstance, random, because again, I keep talking about it, but where the portal leads you to, it's not inside the Earth or in space or anything like that, and it's usually pretty close to where the portal spawned from, so it does seem more like some kind of test, maybe even just military testing, because it's usually in remote places or where other people aren't seeing it, and again, it's just so specific in where it places you. People would be dying. Maybe it is true that maybe people go missing. So maybe that's true. Maybe it is random and people are just going missing from these random portals. One moment they're driving and the next moment they're in deep space and, can't survive that. So maybe missing 411 is related to that, in part. But my gut still says that it's deliberately placed, is what I would guess. Case notes for file 1200. Unraveling the Premonition puzzle. The only natural thing to do around a campfire or indoors at night with friends is to discuss ghost story. It sets a perfect atmospheric vibe, that eerie but most wondrous or mysterious feeling. I just love it. I was like that intro scene from Goosebumps, or was it Are You Afraid of the Dark, where they're around a campfire telling stories. It's great. So indeed, forces at play in the universe that we don't yet understand. That's a perfect summary. I think they can be understood, we just don't have enough data, and it's hard to test them scientifically. And these days, I think we have a somewhat solid grasp, but reaching that point where it's so fully understood, like something else you can physically test by repeating the same thing and seeing the results. I mean, in this case, it's just not testable. But at a point where if you get a premonition, an intense feeling of finding something so specific and nostalgic, it wouldn't shock me at all. If it happened to me, I'd consider it just like another Tuesday. Even if it never happened to me before, I've just read so many stories about it. It seems normal now, right? After reading thousands of stories, sometimes I feel like a scholar of ancient times poring over old tomes of arcane knowledge, and now I just have this grasp of things, we do now. Because you're here listening to it all, so you have the same basic understanding. And even though these things are rare, and a lot of people go through their life never experiencing a glitch, or at least not one that's sufficient enough to even really notice. If it does happen to you, at least you'll be prepared. So that's good. Okay, so to file 1201. The Darkened deck Anomaly. So I like how you describe that event as not happening, but like your brain realized it had already happened. The light was on and had been. You didn't notice it until your brain turned on the memory. Is this evidence again of alien abduction? There's an element in people's memories, as they try to recall them, even in real time, just after being abducted, where that element doesn't fit. A weird anomaly in the stars, the moon, the trees and animal, sound, smells, or in this case, a light. Though you don't mention any time loss, so maybe it was just pure memory alteration, but what would do that? Could a spirit do that, and what for? Is it just an actual glitch in the brain? Because it does seem like your group initially thought, yeah, I mean, this light was always on, and then they thought about it like the light from your phone, like why would we have that on if the light from the inside was on too? So it does seem odd, and I don't really have an explanation for this. With no time loss, I don't think it's aliens. Pure glitch, I'm not sure. And now time for the quote of the day. I love being married. It's so great to find that one special person you want to annoy the rest of your life. Rita Rudner. When I do find a wife, I will be sure to play many pranks on her. Not annoyed to the point of psychosis, because that's going too far. Just enough to have fun. It's so important to have fun, and I am a prankster. That is my spirit animal, is a prankster. I don't think that's an animal, but we'll go with that. Case notes are file 1202. An entire train platform vanished. This feels like a bridge between a quantum immortality buffered universe and your normal universe. So the transition points that sometimes occur for people, where the new universe isn't yet ready to receive the new soul, then they're stuck in this limbo, semi-real universe where it's just like it's a baseline of the real physical matter, but no people. The people on the train were real, and from their perspective, they may have seen you slowly fade out. Because in that moment, you probably were dead on the train, the physical body anyways. The soul is what walked off, your soul. Somewhat fitting that a train is involved, right? But I think it's just a poetic coincidence. Case notes for the bonus file. Haunting Tales from the Frontier Living Program. So 17,000 acre property, holy crap. Imagine having that all to yourself. That'd be too large even for me, a man that loves exploration. But a lot of these accounts reinforce my belief that many spirits are echoes. They're echoes of their former human-occupied vessels. They relive the moments that most affected them. It's almost like in Supernatural, where heaven is like reliving your best moments. In this case, it's reliving moments that are on Earth, not necessarily your best or happiest moments, the ones that have a strong emotional connection. Perhaps in those cabins with the lights on, they had intense scenes like breaking up with their girlfriends, or maybe a murder happened there in the past. That would be extremely traumatic. The bathroom one had been used, and I think we can all imagine the adult acts that occasionally occur in there. So it's not always negative things that happened, or traumatic, just intensely emotional. They aren't random. And now time for the quote of the day. It is wonderful how quickly you get used to things, even the most astonishing. Edith Nesbit. Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day, watching The Expanse, which is just, if you haven't seen it, it's a fantastic show, but it's set in a few hundred years in the future for humanity, and we're out there colonizing the asteroid belts, Mars, etc., and the moon as well. I was just thinking, even if that was real today, maybe a few months would go by, you're on the moon, you're, in a lunar hotel or out in a space station, and eventually it would just feel normal. We normalize reality, whatever reality is. If it's negative or positive, we become accustomed to it. It's similar to how people who win the lottery, initially they are exuberant, they are ecstatic, beyond description. But then after a few months, they normalize. That's kind of why people say that money can't buy happiness, which I don't entirely think is right. I think it can enable happiness, but you have to have the right mindset. And you have to seek out new novel things, because the mind gets used to the same thing over and over. Not that routine is bad, but if you want real happiness, you need to have an open mind and willing to try new things, in my opinion. I'm not exactly the most open-minded person in terms of new experiences. I do like my routine, and I'm still happy. But I think it's true that you do want to experience new things in life. So don't get yourself stuck in a rut where you're just living the same thing day by day, and then you're accustomed to it. So nothing is different. And maybe you're not sad, but you're not really happy, or as happy as you could be. We all owe it to ourselves to be as happy as we can be. Case notes for the file 1203. Twisted Blood. Sibling rivalries. Sometimes I wish I had grown up with a brother or a sister just to experience that. But then I read stories like this and I realize I'm the lucky one, being an only child. Plus more Christmas gifts. So in this case, is it a pure time reset? I'd say quantum immortality has a place, but I wouldn't really go there right away, given the injury suffered was so minor. I harken back to the fact that the human body is very fragile, and even minor injuries can lead to death, but I don't think that's what happened here. I think it may have been an extremely vivid personal simulation. Sometimes when I'm out walking on my hour without a podcast, it's just my mind there, and it tends to wander into performing scenario simulations. Things on my mind like new videos to create, or if I'm going out somewhere, I'll mentally prepare for it. And I mean, most people do this, but sometimes the simulation runs so vividly that you almost lose sight of what's real. Like, I'll be walking for an hour, and half of that hour I don't even remember walking. It was entirely in my mind. So something like that could potentially happen in this case, even though it feels like you really experienced it. Maybe it was just your subconscious and conscious mingling together to such an extent that it was almost like spending time in a hologram room in Star Trek. Pretty cool. Mind is crazy powerful. Never underestimate it. Case notes for the bonus file. The Ghostly Breath. Ah yes, the state of Maine. Spook Central. Home of the great Stephen King. And most of his books take place where the characters are in Maine as well. I haven't been, but it's definitely on the agenda, and I want to live in New Hampshire, and so it's right next door. Definitely will go. So I'll track this up to a more macabre note. It's the painful echoes of death. Well, yeah, death isn't so permanent as we know from quantum immortality, but for the souls the echoes left behind, I mean, I do wonder how much sentience still lingers behind. And my hope is that none at all. It's a program that's recycled and repeated, but it's just a program. They're not really there, not the you that matters, the sentience. Hopefully that's true, because you don't want to imagine that people who died horrific deaths relive that moment in perfect sentience, the player is still there. But I don't think it's possible, because if we die, our soul carries on, we don't notice, and we're just in a new host body in a new universe. So if a fragment of the soul is left behind, it's not the part that controls or enables sentience. Hopefully, but I think that's true. Case notes for the bonus file. The Enigma of Paradise Road. Well, this was a warning indeed, but it sounds more alien or experimental than ghostly, given the history of cars losing power, and the gold lights appearing. That strikes me more as a alien intervention. The only cases of spirits creating lights in blue orb fashion, not gold, and they're very rare. So blue orbs, could there be golden balls of lightning as well? Maybe. But I'm going to stick on this one with aliens. Get the wild hair going. And now time for the quote of the day. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Benjamin Franklin. Just going with a very classic Founding Fathers quote here. Definitely speaks to me. I think liberty is the utmost, most important thing that we take for granted, honestly. And we're not 100% free, absolutely not, but we do have a lot, especially compared to the bulk of humanity. So we should cherish that, always seek more, and protect the amount that we have now. And you can do that in various ways. It's not all political. You can take liberty in your own personal finances. Instead of spending more money, save more. Have some in cash, some in gold and silver, Bitcoin if you like that. I'm not really a fan of crypto unless it's backed by something else, but that's to the side. I think there are various ways you can take control of your life. Obviously having land, property, homestead, off-grid, or even if you're on the grid, buy yourself solar panels and a battery. So, if the worst case happens, and maybe there's a crazy storm that rolls through, and then you're not at the mercy of the grid if it goes down. You still have access, you can protect your solar panels during the storm, and then after it, when the sun comes back, you're good to go. You have battery storage as well, so all the essentials, the food won't spoil in your fridge and stuff like that. You'll still be able to live relatively normally and have a connection to the outside world if you get Starlink internet. It's pretty crazy the amount of stuff we can do just with technology now. You can have an entirely off-grid or on the grid but protected if it goes down. With solar panels, batteries, Starlink internet, gas stoves for that. You can have a wood-burning stove as well, and obviously it generates heat in the winter. It's awesome. I think it's so cool that we can be so insulated from the outside world while still engaging with it, but having your own base camp where you're covered. Recommend that to everyone. Case notes for the file 1204. World War II, supernatural style. A location infused with horror and indeed anger from the atrocities committed all those decades ago. Maybe indeed exactly in that spot. I can't blame the spirits left behind. What I find interesting is how they manifest to us as a darkness. Is that intentional? Or is it merely our own perception? Like the story with the man that had a dark aura around him? Maybe it's not a dark glow emitting, but rather our subconscious detecting that presence of evil and then coloring it in for us. Color itself is an abstract construct of the subconscious. It's not real, it's just based on the type of light that's emitted from the object as it bounces off of it. The structure basically determines the color. So from that we can infer that if there's light emitted from being, and there's some way the brain can process if it's good or bad, or negative or positive, well, there you go. The brain can choose what color that you see, so we understand it. Gives us a warning, and I mean, it makes evolutionary sense too. If you can have a way to detect if someone is good or bad, you'd want to be able to know, because that'll increase your chance of reproducing, which is what evolution cares about. Passes on those genes, and other people are like that, and they're more likely to survive and procreate. Simple. Case notes for the file 1205. An impossible message on a dead phone. Oh yeah, the snake game. I spent too many hours on that one, Pac-Man, and the one where you had to send a tank shell at an angle to destroy the enemy. And yeah, thunderstorms, they're mighty forces of nature, manifesting in great strikes of energy. If anything feels like it's designed like a system in a video game, it'd be disastrous scenarios like thunderstorms and hurricanes, maybe tornadoes. And then we have a sibling terror striking again. I do wonder if that message was sent into your mind, but wasn't truly connected to the phone. Or if it was some person that knew you and wanted to protect you. Someone that passed away. Just watching over you. It's a way that a spirit can connect and let you know that they're still around without being overt. Because if I was a spirit and I wanted to let someone know that I was still around, I wouldn't want it to be too obvious because they might go crazy, thinking, yeah, okay, spirits are real. Am I actually crazy? You wouldn't want to manifest to them. You want it to be more subtle, where there's a way they can opt out of believing it, like in this case. I was very curious that the phone didn't have enough battery to be turned on, and then after this, it did. It's almost like the spirit juiced it up. Case notes for the file 1206. The hidden threads of premonition. To dream is to let our subconscious roam the infinite plane of knowledge that permeates the universe, including time. That information is real, but it's so vast, and when we dream, we give our subconscious permission to explore it far deeper than through our limited human senses. One thing I do wonder is, for those of us that never remember our dreams, is that a subconscious choice that we make? I can imagine my soul in the real world having left directions for my own play experience in the simulation. So maybe I didn't want additional information. You could almost view it as selecting a difficulty setting for the game. So if you want a more relaxed experience, you select Remember All Dreams before loading in. And if you want a more hardcore experience, you go with no dream remembering at all. No supernatural events, or at least none that could help you make it easier. Anything pointing to this being more of a game and a simulation game, that's what I hope is true, even though I can't prove it. Case notes for the file 101. The Sinister Russian Councelor. Catching live rabbits? Ugh. I think my heart is too soft for that. I remember when I was 14, I was with my dad for a week in October, and he took me hunting. We came across an elk, but I didn't have the stomach to shoot it. Whereas fishing I could do, I guess it feels more removed. It's not as intense as killing an elk. This kind of knockout game is extremely dangerous, by the way, just so everyone is aware. Losing consciousness isn't like in the movies. You just bop someone on the head and they wake up later, no harm, no foul. No. That almost never happens without some kind of brain damage and trauma. It's so damn wild, though, that he wasn't a counselor. How did he even infiltrate? He knew there was an exchange program for this camp and pretended to be in it. To get access to kids? Or teenagers? That's just creepy as hell. And now time for the quote of the day. If all else fails, immortality can always be assured by spectacular error. John Kenneth Galbraith. What I take this to mean is immortality is just, biological immortality, not magical where nothing can kill you, but just not aging, is potentially possible in the human body. It would be a great genetic transformation, and not really one that would perpetuate itself because it doesn't necessarily increase your chances of procreating. But if it does exist and people naturally select for it just out of curiosity, then eventually maybe the human species could evolve to be naturally immortal, biologically speaking, just not aging. Now, probably not. Probably it's going to happen through scientific innovation to cure death, the curse of death. Being able to live forever would be awesome, at least biologically speaking. You're always going to have that. And, quantum immortality is something interesting, but it doesn't fix biological death. Because if you die in all copies of every universe, well, then I guess the game resets. I want the game, this reality, to be a simulation, but I also want to live forever. Basically, I don't want to gamble that all of this is wrong and, death is just the end. That's just boring. I like life. There's too much stuff to do and learn and experience. Even if baseline is neutrality, where I'm doing the same thing again and again, that's okay. And you can relive it with other people. I've been rewatching shows, but reaction videos on YouTube, so I get the experience again. I live vicariously through other people. And you can do that in many ways with new foods and experiences you've already done, but it's just someone else that you care about or that is interesting. And you can relive the same experience. Technically speaking, maybe I have genetic code that makes me biologically immortal and I'll never age. Very, 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 very low chance of that. But who knows? You have Keanu Reeves that doesn't appear to age, or maybe a little bit. So I do hope I'm a vampire. Case notes for the file 1207. The Time Portal Within Portland State University. Curious, there was a story I read a long time ago. My memory fails me, but I'm pretty sure it was in the US, West Coast as well. Probably California. Someone was studying and took an elevator up on campus. When they came out, they were in the past as well. It was an unfinished building, no windows or anything. It was still just like open air. They could see down below, and the cars and buildings were from decades ago. It's always elevators. Something about being in a metal box triggers these Schrödinger events, I like to think of them as. But on the macro, not quantum scale. It's like light is forced to choose what orientation and velocity and vector it is in when it's interacted with. The waveform dissipates into a proper quantized packet, instead of just a wave. This applies to everything, not just light, but it's just easier to test with light. So likewise, for us on the macro scale, if isolated away, the normal state of binding to one universe is no longer valid. We're in a superposition, at least for the soul. It can move around, and hasn't decided where it's going to land yet. Heck, this may even be reproducible, a testable phenomena, isolating people into metal boxes and seeing if they emerge in the same universe after a few minutes. Maybe the fact the box, the elevator, moves relative to surrounding mass also matters. It's like to generate an EM field, you have to have metal that's spinning quickly. Hot metal. And it'll generate a field. So it's not just isolating a single thing, there could be other factors. Movement could be a factor as well. Case notes for the bonus file. Horror at the Red-Eyed Mountain. So when the drums popped into the story, my mind connected to Jumanji. That's a creepy part of the movie for sure, the drums. Ooh. I had never heard of javelinas before. They're pretty interesting creatures. This is a description of them that I read. Javelina, tayaku, also known as collared peccary, are medium-sized animals that look similar to wild boar. They have mainly short, coarse, salt and pepper-colored hair, short legs, and a pig-like nose. The hair around the neck and shoulder area is lighter in color, giving the look of a collar. Javelina have long, sharp, canine teeth, which protrude from the jaws about an inch. They're herbivores, which is good to know. The more I hear about animals being strangely, menacingly possessed when they otherwise wouldn't be, especially the glowing eyes, the more convinced I become that demons or at least spirits are indeed able to possess them too, not just human beings. It would explain a lot. And now time for the quote of the day. I don't want to achieve immortality through my work. I want to achieve it through not dying. Woody Allen. Hell yeah. It would be one of the greatest achievements ever, but there's a lot of postulates going around now that people who, the first 1,000-year-old man probably already exists, probably has already been born. It could be you or me for all we know. Science is advancing so quickly that I'm hopeful of that. There's a website that I pay attention to. It's called Sen's Research. It's a group of scientists that collaborate together, and they're trying to cure aging, but not in the way you would think. It's not to prevent a body from aging, because that is too complicated. It's like in computer code. If you change one thing, then 10 other things change that have nothing to do with it, but because they all connect, it doesn't work. Preventing aging is almost impossible, at least as far as we understand it now. But to revert the damage from aging, the metabolic processes and buildup and damage that occurs, cancer and so on. That is, still incredibly difficult, but more realistic. So there are treatments that will be developed which will be able to reduce your biological age effectively. As long as every facet of the body can be repaired, the metabolic age, the organs, blood quality, brain function and all that, as long as you can prevent disease, well, theoretically you could live forever. Also lengthening telomeres so the genetic code isn't damaged. Yeah, there's a lot of things to work on, but within 50 years, maybe. It's just down to doing it quickly enough where someone doesn't have irreversible damage. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.